Alright, so a few weeks ago I filmed a video that was how to write better female characters. Had a fun thumbnail. I was very intrigued by it because I asked a bunch of females their opinions, both writers and avid readers, so that was really useful for me, especially going into a project here soon where one of the main characters is a female and having, actually the core main character is a female, so that helped me a lot, and apparently it helped some other writers too, which is always good to hear because that video was actually the most well-performing on the channel, so thank you to everyone who watched that and to all the people who I kind of pulled aside and pushed
against the wall with a dagger and was like, tell me your darkest secrets, how to write better female characters.
What I want to do today is something very similar, but for the opposite gender. I want to go over a video in which we break down some of the worst mistakes that both male and female writers are making when portraying the male gender, and not just with male main characters, but with male side characters as well, because I think it's really interesting that both of these genders in fiction, we have had serious complaints over the last couple of years when it comes to seeing popular media depicting them not necessarily incorrectly, but to a way in which the popular culture is getting a lot of backlash on these portrayals. So I've kind of gone over and looked into 5 different mistakes that people are making, and 5 different solutions, each one matching those mistakes, because I want to be very practical about this. So if that sounds interesting, you can keep watching. Bit of a disclaimer here. I want to be very honest with you guys. I'm not a published author. I have basically nothing in my name. I have some pretty sweet websites though. I am a CEO of a publishing company because I do want to publish in the near future, but I want to be very transparent that I don't want to be one of those YouTubers here on YouTube who is basically just giving writing advice in a very definitive way, even though they haven't written anything, even though they haven't tested out this stuff, especially on marketing. I want to be transparent that this is stuff that I'm trying to compile from other people giving advice on it, making this useful into a resource that you guys can use, that is tangible, that is practical. So yeah, take everything I say with a big portion of salt, along with maybe some pepper. Yeah, so without further ado, let's get into how to write better characters, the 5 mistakes and the 5 solutions. So the first mistake I've seen is kind of power without cost. This is kind of when we see main characters who are male written with, or side characters kind of are invincible, nothing really costs them anything. And this is a major weakness because readers disconnect with this amount of power. Bad examples, of course, would be the original Superman. If you've ever read any of the original comics, like the really old ones, or the radio dramas, because I haven't seen most of the movies, but I have seen the radio dramas or listened to them, and in them it is demeaning of both the female gender and of the male gender in the way it is portrayed, but that worked very well back then. It wouldn't work as well now, because there wasn't any cost to the power. So Spider-Man kind of is one of the better examples of this because there is cost to the power. You know, he's consistently making sacrifices. Kaladin is a wonderful example of this. All of his power is stemmed from overcoming trauma, and you can use magic systems to do this very efficiently, where if you tie your magic system, I've done this with one of my books, where the trauma point is kind of one of the major things with magic system, where moving forward they have to overcome that specifically to be able to use these abilities. Maybe you tie the abilities to the trauma somehow, or like unleashed something where that damaged them and caused the trauma, then they have to get over that trauma and use the abilities again later on. That can be very powerful, and Brandon Sanderson especially used this very well in the way in which you don't think of guns as a magic system very much, but in the Wax and Wayne series, which I just finished, Wayne getting over his fear of guns from his previous trauma, and being able to use those in the end of the 4th or 3rd book, and then using them again in the 5th book of the Wax and Wayne trilogy, is really insightful in the way that uses it. And of course, it's not a magic system, you know. So kind of the fixes to this problem of the the power without any cost. Always give your magic system a cost. Always give your characters a cost in anything that they're doing. I think is one of the most widespread pieces of advice that I've seen recently, but of course, subjective. Give every strength, but pair it with a disability or cost, exhaustion, emotional damage, relational strain. Let them fail at side things, relationships, leadership, communication. I guess the more powerful he is, the heavier the price probably needs to feel. Right, that kind of moves us right into our second problem, and that second problem is the hyper-macho or the hyper-bumbling. And we have seen this also with the, I believe that I covered this in the female video as well, where you see, cold, empty, kind of action figure-y. A lot of it comes down to stoicism, which is often wrongly portrayed in fiction as well. But it's a side tangent, where the character either has no emotions or is hyper-emotional. And of course, it's always a spectrum, but never be on one end or the other, always be somewhere in between, I think, is one of the tenets of this idea, because, all characters should have, a spectrum of emotions where they're somewhere on there. They're never going to be absolutely emotionless or absolutely full of emotions, unless you're tying it to something where they are going to be that. You can have a magic system where, I've actually done this with one of my Canadian magic systems, where they, after using it, they become very subjective, and they cease to see reason through their emotions, where they have like no more emotional feedback for a little bit until the effects of using the magic wear off. So never make a decision that needs emotion after you use the magic is kind of one of the costs of that. And then you, on the other side of the spectrum, you have the hyper-bumbling, weaker, useless fool. And this isn't necessarily with just emotions too, but this is capability and competency. So if that makes sense, your hyper-bumbling fool, would be Homer Simpson, I guess, would be a great example of that. Although I'm sure he has some wonderful character nuances later on. I haven't watched that as much. And then, Dom from Fast and Furious would be your macho man. So again, Kaladin would be a good example of this. He's good in some things and bad at some things. But a better example would also be probably Aragorn. He's strong and emotionally hesitant sometimes. Sandwise is soft. He's brave. He's resilient and strong. Uncle Iroh from Avatar and the Last Airbender is a great example of this. He's got that emotional depth and also the competency depth, where he's good at some things, bad at some things, but always on the spectrum, never one end or the other. So fixes would be mixed strength and compassion equally, or depending upon the character, their trauma, their arc, and position in the story. The second fix would be to give them moments of restraint, patience, nurturing habits, mentoring, cooking, caring for others. Iroh kind of fit that very well. Masculinity isn't really about domination. It's what you choose to protect, which I think, I've talked about this with my philosophy club, which I am currently the president of. And I think Kaladin fits that very well. It's the balance of, I can only protect so much, but what do I choose to protect with that? So if you can find that with your characters, that'll be very powerful, and I think really improve a lot of what I see the fault, and what the people I've interviewed have seen the fault in characters of. So hopefully that's interesting and useful. Problem number 3 out of the 5 is inconsistency. So this is kind of male characters who are acting out of character in very odd and triggering ways, in a sense that's like, where did that come from? Just serving the plot instead of having something actually going on there. Readers really lose connection at that emotionally, and there's no more pathos with that. So kind of Kylo Ren would be a great example of that. The entire Star Wars, what is that, third Star Wars trilogy? Sequels? The sequels? Yeah. The modulation of hating Rey and then hitting on her is very confusing. A good example is Captain America. He knows what he's standing for. He's very consistent, and he'll make mistakes, which is really important too. Always have your characters make mistakes, in my opinion. That is objective. That is just my opinion. You don't have to do that, but I think it's good to have your characters make mistakes and show them to the reader, and can really grow their emotional resonance and sympathy for the character. So your fix with this one might be kind of go ahead and write a guiding principle. This could be like one sentence where you're looking at what you want your character to, their values to be. What is it that is kind of their core belief that everything is going to stem through? And this can lead to objectifying major decisions, where you're looking at it through that core belief, which can be really helpful. Like, why is this important to the character? Does it match that belief? You can use this with reoccurring habits, phrases, or quirks, which is really useful because you can always bring those things back. Like a quirk, you know, maybe they accidentally shot that's kind of random. I don't want to get demonetized. Maybe they accidentally shot someone that they cared about, and now, hey, that Wax and Wayne trilogy, what was I saying earlier? And now they're very hesitant to use a gun, or maybe they have a weird quirk where they kind of like pretend to pull a trigger and it sets something off in their brain. I don't know. So, you know, consistency doesn't really make characters boring. It makes them more believable, and if you're able to lead consistency into a point where you can see the characters changing and their actions changing with who the character is, that's going to make all of these new character, they're the same person, new character kind of, you know, decisions all the more impactful. All right, so mistake number 4, this is our second to last mistake, is purpose without depth. You know, so they've got a purpose, you know, save the world, or you know, beat the villain, but the goal might feel hollow because you know, maybe there's no true motivation to what they're doing, because, you know, the wizard shows up and tells the chosen one, let's take Luke for example. We've got Obi-Wan showing up, and he tells Luke, you know, you've got to come with me and do this thing. You know, we're gonna go find Princess Leia. Your droid had this thing in her, and it was through you. It's Providence. Also, I know you're the chosen one, but I won't tell you that. And so, you know, Luke's like, why would I do that? I have, you know, Aunt May and Uncle, oh my goodness, I can't remember. You know, I have my family here. I cannot abandon them. And so there's a reason why though Aunt and Uncle must be destroyed by the Empire, where they're searching for the droids. And, you know, that is what sets him off. He wants revenge, and that leads into more important resolve and courage and motivations to pursue destroying the Empire and the Death Star. So there needs to be some purpose with their mission and core value, as we talked about earlier. If you can weave that in, that'll really improve the characters. So a bad example of this would be kind of early Aragon. There are some odd things, of course. His uncle's death at the hand of the Razak, it's not really a spoiler, is a purpose for him to go out in revenge, but then it kind of shifts a little bit, and there's less character agency in that. I love the inherent cycle so much, I have it up there. A good example is Aragorn, as we said earlier. You know, he fears that he is going to fail his people, and you see this a lot more in the movies than you do in the books, which I really like, because he's got that fear, and then he's also got the clash of becoming king again, you know, or becoming the rightful king, and you know, fears doing kind of what his ancestors did, falling to the temptation of the ring, which is really interesting and fun. So, you know, it's Zuko seeking his own identity and not just approval from outside sources like his father. So the fix for this would be, what is his private why? Kind of like that core principle we talked about earlier, and if you can weave these two together, that would be incredible. You know, show personal stakes in small ways, quiet moments, keepsakes, whispered confessions. Make sure winning or losing, you know, matters. It needs to matter to the character, not just to the world. So, you know, readers care more about a character's heart than their heads a lot of the time, I think. So the last point we have here, a mistake and hopefully a fix that will be beneficial to you, as a resource, even if you made it this far in the video. If you can't tell, I have not had enough coffee today, and so I'm very proud of you. Good job. So flaw number 5 is, emotional flatness, and we've already kind of covered this with writers think, men are sometimes, and we see this in the females a lot, I think, in female writers portraying men, is the utter stoicism. I don't know where this comes from, because I know a lot of people who would call themselves stoics. I would call myself stoic to a very reasonable degree. I have read a lot of it, meditations, but it's not emotionlessness, it's control of what you can control rather than the things you can't control, which is your emotions. It does not mean being devoid of said emotions. Sorry for the rant there, but and then this is, I'm gonna continue. Bad example, early Superman, noble, flat, kind of, not much character depth in being emotionless. Also not much, tying back to that previous point, not much, reason for what they're doing. Like, why are you being a good guy? You could do other stuff. We need to see why you're doing this. Good example is, Mr. Darcy. He's profoundly emotional despite actually being a very stoic character. Kaladin, he's got these walls that he erects around certain people and that he takes down around certain people as well. Iroh, as I mentioned earlier, he's emotional, but also wise in the ways in which he uses emotion, especially around Zuko and his enemies. So your fix could be, show emotion through action. Jaw clench, hands trembling, it's the show don't tell, and you have a connection. You are literally able to bring the reader into the minds of the character, which is something that no other art form has to such a degree that creative writing, especially the fiction, does. And so if you're able to link thoughts and the way in which they counteract and kind of form a paradox with the way in which they act or the movements they make, that can be very interesting. And that is also going to be one of the things that will make your characters feel more balanced. And so, Darcy, with, even in the movie, his hand thing, after he lets her up on the carriage, that's very, we know what's going on there. So one scene of emotional openness, if reluctant, will really probably help your novel if you have a stoic character who you want to salvage. Let emotions leak out through those actions, through quiet moments, not just dialogue, although men will talk about their emotions, which girls seem to not really realize that we do. So real strength isn't really the absence of feeling. It is, it's feeling all the time, but choosing when to register to those around you. So if that makes any sense, I think. So I guess a lot of it, in recap, is the balance of emotionlessness, emotion, reaction, and agency and decision, reason, and the reasons why, and why they are making certain decisions. It's really a balance, as we talked about with females. It is not being, you can throw in odd things, like I like Hema. That might not be a weird thing for me, but I also like, there's a bunch of stuffed animals right there, like ones that have collected through my childhood. That's a quirk of mine. I have a bunch of plants. There's all these weird little things that I might bring in to a character that make them feel not your generic, just soldier who we brought in from the streets and now we have in a rom-com. We need more. We need these little quirks. So it's really all about balance. I hope this video was useful to you. As I said, this is all just, take it all with a grain of salt. I'm not saying any of this stuff works definitively. I'm just saying this is stuff that I've seen is useful to some extent. I found interesting and intriguing, and I hope you do too. So I know there are a bunch of people on this channel who, not a bunch, there's a handful who watch every single video. If you're one of those people, go ahead and put down in the comments a topic for another video, because I have trouble sometimes coming up with and motivating myself to film new videos on topics. So if you have a topic, something that you're wondering, we can figure it out in the comments. We can chat about it there, but we can also maybe, help brainstorm the next video. That would be really fun to do with you guys, and I think you have the right to the output of this channel is up to you guys a lot of the time too. So yeah, if you're new here, hope you had fun. I'm not gonna ask you to subscribe because that was a ranty video. Blessings.